Hi everyone, I just want to pop in, and for those of you that are already with us, we're going to get started in just a moment, but I do want to mention that if you think this is a room that somebody you know might be interested in, I heard a great tip to search and ping people. My dogs will be joining us today as well. If you hit the little plus sign at the bottom, you can search certain keywords that might pop up in profiles of those that are following you, and if you think this might be a room they're interested in, might be an easier way to find them and ping them in. So certainly encourage you all to do that if you'd like. And then also, go ahead and follow us. Anyone that's speaking, follow those people, and that way we all kind of interconnect. And also, if you follow my profile, or at least look at my profile, at any point, my email is in there to connect. It connects to our social medias, and it shows all the rooms that we're hosting and working towards making clubs. So all that information is there under mine. And this is Julie speaking, so that's all I have for now. I'm going to pass it over to you, Michael, and let you get started.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Julie. Appreciate that. I see we have some additional people joining. Edie, thank you very much.
Hey, Edie. Good to see you on here.
So let's go ahead and get started. Hello to Clinical Trial Clubhousers. We're a small but growing group, and it's been really, this is our second installment of what's turning out to be a great club for clinical trialists, pharma industry execs, and patients who are interested in discussing burning questions in clinical trials. And so what we've been doing is we've been polling as well as, just from last week, coming up with things that are of real interest and solvable types of problems that may have been persisting in clinical trials, whether that be on the operations side, the design side, or the implementation side. Today's co-moderators joining me for the Clinical Trials Clubhouse are Talia Nicolau-Height and Heather Williams. So thank you to both of you. Both are exceptional execs in the clinical trials industry who work for other organizations. But I'm very grateful for all of their help in making this clubhouse so special. It might help you to understand the genesis of this club and kind of the way we are running this. We're taking a little bit of a different approach. I work with a very passionate group of people steeped in artificial intelligence and fulfilling patient needs at a company called Consuli. And we're a startup creating a disruptive approach to patient recruitment and ultimately giving prospective trial participants a better level of transparency, control of their data, and compensation for sharing that data and participating in clinical trials. We like to say that we're dealing the patients into the data economy, and if you want to know more or join our movement, I hope you'll check us out at www.consuli.net. That's CONSULI. We stood this clubhouse room up to share, learn, and take the pulse of people like yourselves, and we're all learning so much from your questions, your answers, and new ideas. We know that your time is important, so we're trying to keep this clubhouse session to an hour, but last week it ran over a little bit more, and we're happy to continue to that. During this time, we'll be addressing what we believe is this week's one burning question, and that comes from questions that we from email and from social media. So let's get started here, and Talia, I'll send this over to you.
Great. Well, good morning from where I am. I'm in San Diego today. I know we've got folks joining from all over, but it's really awesome to be here really thrilled to be participating in this weekly clubhouse with the group here, and excited about today's discussion. So just a quick intro to myself real quick. My background is in clinical trials. I'm currently at a early stage startup, and previous to that, I've worked as a study coordinator, project manager, and I've really worked at the site level. Love clinical trials, super passionate about it, and that's why I'm thrilled to be involved in Clubhouse and with this discussion in particular today. So we're going to be opening up the discussion on our, this week's one burning question here in just a minute. But before we do that, I'm thinking maybe we just say hello to some of the folks that we do have on the stage this morning. Let's start with Heather. Do you want to give a little introduction to yourself, please?
Sure, happy to. Thanks, Talia. Hi, everyone. My name's Heather Williams, and I am in the e-clinical technology space. So my world is all about how are we collecting data, how are we doing that smartly and most efficiently for the folks that it matters to the most, not only at the site level, but also our patients, and then all the way up the tree to how are we transferring that data off to everyone involved to be able to really make the most use of it. So I work for an e-clinical technology company, and my background is in operations as well as moons and moons ago in some business development and marketing in this space. So I'm just excited to be here today and hopefully be a resource to anyone on the call who has any questions that are a little bit more driven around that e-clinical technology and data capture and data integration and interoperability space. And I'll hand it back to you, Talia. Thank you. I'm Heather. I'm done speaking.
Thank you, Heather. This is great. Let's see. I know we're going to be pulling some people up to the stage here in just a minute. Maybe what we'll do here is let's introduce our burning question, and then we'll get this conversation going. As Julie and Michael said, when we're getting this conversation going, we'll just ask everybody to please give a quick intro to themselves before they sort of weigh in on the topic or in response to something that one of the clubhousers have just said. So our burning question for this week is the pharma and clinical trials industry successfully communicating with potential study participants? If not, why? And what solutions can we offer? So let's get started here. Want to see if maybe we start with our panelists, and then we'll open it up to everybody else. Again, just raise your hand if you'd like to be called onto the stage, and then we can, when we get to that section, Julie will start to bring you up. So Heather, do you want to kick off our first response?
Sure, happy to. So this some of the conversation around this came out of the really great stuff that was in the first one that I participated in the last time around, and I think that I come from the data management side of things, so we're handling the CRS, we're handling the ePro, we're handling the data that goes out to these patients from a clinical perspective. And one of the things that I noticed is we actually get a lot of contact from patients that are involved in our trials that are a little bit confused about things, and the way that things get communicated to them can be, even if we do our best, challenging. And overarchingly, as an industry, we know what we're talking about when we talk to each other, but we don't always communicate that all the way down the line, not only to patients that are in our trials, but patients that might want to be in our trials. And so from my perspective, I think that collectively, I think we all see it as a bit of a problem, but how do we, instead of waiting to have those questions come to us individually, how do we collectively get together in industry and communicate the value of this to potential patients consistently and cooperatively and proactively, so that information makes sense, and we de-jargon a lot of it. So I don't have a lot of interesting answers yet, but I'm really excited to hear what everybody has to say about the question and where we can start and being a part of helping with that.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%, Heather. That's great. Let's see if we can grab some input from some of the folks we have on our stage. Maybe you want to see if, I don't know, let's call on Laura. Do you have any input to give? And love to hear from you on this topic. Not sure if
Tanya, I just wanted to say I invited Laura to come up to the stage.
Let's not do that. We discussed this.
Just one small additional dimension here to add to the conversation, because clearly, the question around is the industry and the pharma side of things successfully communicating with potential study participants. This weekend is Rare Disease Day, and certainly among the orphan and rare disease patient population, there are some nuances of communication there. So I'd ask if anybody in the audience or Laura specifically, you want to think about that a little bit, because I think some of the work that you've been doing is definitely in that category.
Yes, hi, can you hear me now?
Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's something that has been on the back of my mind, especially working with a lot of CROs where a lot of the interface with the patient really doesn't occur through the sponsor, but sometimes through the CRO. And so it's something that, like when I run my clinical trials, I don't really interface closely with the patients. However, we do a lot of, where we invite patients to the site when we were open, or we do virtual patients advocacy kind of events. But again, we, cannot really discuss in details with them about the drugs. And so there is definitely a barrier there, and I'm not sure how we can really deal with that under the regulations and the constraints of confidentiality and all of that.
Yeah, that is a barrier, and that does make it difficult. Would love to hear from anybody in the room that has a perspective on this. Either has, is working on the industry sort of sponsor side, and how they have their company either currently or previously, sort of worked through this problem. Also, any clinical operations folks in the room, sort of at any level, whether they're operating at the clinical research sites or in patient recruitment specifically, at the CRO level or on the sponsor level. Love to hear from anybody on this.
Yeah, Tanya, one of the areas that definitely I know is something that Heather and I have talked about before is the use of jargon in the way in which we communicate with patients and potential trial enrollees. There's enough stigmatism already about getting engaged in a clinical trial, and often I think even the word subjects or clinical subjects, things of this nature, lend to concerns about guinea pigging and things like that. I'm wondering, maybe there are some people that would like to speak to that.
Yeah, Michael, thank you. Edie, brought you to the stage. You have input on this?
I do. Thank you so very much. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Edie Edens. I am a senior research compliance consultant with First Class Solutions, which is a real fancy way of saying if it is a part of your human subjects clinical research compliance need from the A to Z of doing a trial, whether you're a large AMC, whether you're a research site, a small community-based physician practice, or anything in between, that's my sweet spot. And I'm a lawyer by trade, so I always self-disclose that, not because I want to make enemies, but more because I want folks to know that I come from this deep legal and ethics background, right? Like that's the hat that I have on, just innately. And so I think this is a really interesting topic, and I certainly cannot speak from the sponsor perspective in that I more negotiate with sponsors on behalf of clients. I don't necessarily usually often represent or work for the sponsor. They usually in-house what I do and have their own, in-house teams for this. But what I see is this interesting paradigm, especially after the last year we've had, of really mixed messaging, right? And you stumble upon this whether you realize it or not, like when folks are talking about vaccination efforts, when folks are talking about participation in COVID research trials. And what I mean by that is we've always had some sense of unspoken lines of where I feel like we felt like it was in our industry the sponsor's responsibility to communicate with a potential participant versus where it actually became the research site and the PI's place to participate, right? And what types of vantage points they were communicating from to try to elicit that voluntariness to participate and that interest and to really give their patients opportunities. But now we've added the media, right? And so I think that, in order to continue to be successful moving forward, and I should add that it's not just that you added the media talking about clinical trials on the evening news as COVID advanced, right? You've also added a significant, especially in the United States, emphasis by the media on racial and social injustice and the call to arms and action about that is layered into, of course, the disparities that we encounter in healthcare and clinical trials. And so I think because of that extra messaging and that extra focus, and I'm not saying it's good or bad, it's just factually present, we really have to begin to think about our messaging, right? Because now it's not just a matter of these unspoken rules about who should communicate what to a potential participant, how we should elicit it. Now you have a whole new player, the media, right? That may or may not be coming from a clinical trial perspective, may or may not have the motivation to elicit participation and show, the positives of what can come from participating in clinical research. And so because of that, we have to retool. We've got to go back to the box because I think what was working prior to these conversations in the last 12 to 18 months isn't necessarily going to work forward.
Hi, can you hear me?
Thanks, Edie. Yes, Allison.
Hi, I am a patient that participated in a clinical trial at the NIH, and I just wanted to follow up on that and say that in addition to the media, I think that support groups on social media is another new place that is really important to tap into. I lead Boston College Psychosomatic COVID support group, and we have gotten so much outreach for clinical trials as well as research opportunities. And what we have done is we're trying to break down the barriers, especially regarding jargon. So we will get emails of clinical trial opportunities to PACE for the patients. We have an internal process. 3 of us have to approve it, say that we feel comfortable, spreading this opportunity, educating people about the opportunity. And then in our spreadsheet, we actually break down why we think a patient should consider participating in this opportunity, what it actually means. Basically, we're translating the jargon for them. And then various things that they should consider if they're going to participate in the opportunity. And so I think in addition to me...
Can everybody hear Allison? I think she's...
I was just about to ask, am I the only one losing her? Because I really wanted to hear what she had to say.
Yeah, so Allison, if you get into clear air here, please repeat about the last 15 seconds of what you were talking about.
Yeah, I was really interested in hearing Allison as well. Hopefully we'll get her back in a moment.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll bring her back in just a second. I wanted to take a minute. This is Talia again. Edie, I think what you were saying is right on. It's so funny because as we're thinking about, how to...
Like engaging social media.
Oh, there she is. There she is. Allison, if you can hear us, we lost you about 30 seconds ago. You got into a sort of a bad signal. Could you sort of back up about 30 seconds? You were talking about how there's a whole process for how you get language and posts.
Sure, can you hear me?
Communicate out to in front of people.
Still sounds a little sketch, Allison.
Yeah. Well,
Still breaking up.
There she is.
go ahead, Allison, please.
I'm so sorry. We are.
Allison, I think we're still having trouble hearing you. So, yeah, we'll bring you back up here in a minute if that's okay. I wanted to respond to something that Edie was saying about how just trying to find the right language and the right how we communicate with patients used to be something that was largely focused on what it was that the sponsor or the sites were going to say, and now we have this whole other party like the media, and I completely agree with that. I'll back up to an experience I had at a research site that I worked at, and it was difficult to really sort of transfer from using the word subject in our communication that was put out in front of potential patients to using a much more friendly word. We actually got some pushback early on in the early days when we wanted to use different language, and it was an interesting sort of move because it felt like we were being told by IRBs and things like that we needed to use some more technical terms, but they just did not feel friendly to us. They did not feel it was an interesting sort of transition, and now we're sort of at another inflection point, it feels like, because now we have these additional, places that we're communicating.
Well, and I think it's also 100% echo that, and I think it's a few different levels of okay, for starters, most of us in the industry, and of course I'm going to say this and half the line's going to go, I have a degree in PR, but the overwhelming majority of us don't have some PR or marketing background. And that's not a part of our jobs. If you're in clinical research jobs, that's not the focus of your job all day, right? Mm-hmm. And so the channels by which we have gone about recruitment have been very different. And I would layer that with, and I'll pick on my own regulatory and research compliance industry willfully here, we have 20, 30, 40-page informed consent forms. So even when we are following the rules to the letter, doing everything we're supposed to do by the regulations, and doing that because of these deep ethical underpinnings that we want to ensure a participant or a patient has all the information, there's still problems with our communication, deep-rooted problems with our communication. I think everyone would agree willfully about that, right? And so then you add a new player to the mix of the media. We're not already an industry outside of, again, certain sections, maybe, at the sponsor level where you do have a marketing team, but certainly not small research sites, are not used to doing their own marketing and PR, not only about themselves, but about, hey, it would be great to join a trial, and let me tell you why, mm-hmm. right? In a way that feels like you're not being coercive or that you might get in trouble with the IRB. It's not a conversation that our regulatory side is openly beginning to have. And yet, again, because of this new player, this new entry of the media and the public discussion surrounding clinical trials in the last 18 months that's gotten so hot, it's happening. Marketing is happening one way or the other. And so I wonder, are we jumping ahead of that and controlling the message? Are we truly acting as the advocates that we could be? I find myself, I don't know about you guys, I'd love to hear, I find myself talking to more and more, even just family, friends, neighbors, who finally, A, understand what the heck it is I do in some way, shape, or form that they didn't a year ago, and B, are is it really safe for me to take this vaccine? Should I really participate in this oncology trial? I want to know what you think. And so it suddenly turned into this, wow, I guess we do have a power of advocacy on individual and group and organizational levels to talk to potential patients more openly about what it looks and feels like to be a part of clinical trials. And then, as Allison was saying, and I hope she gets to tell us more, narrow down into very specific trials and support groups and give them exact reasons why participation makes sense. But it's scary to do that in the regulatory environment. It is.
Can I actually add to this? I'm conducting, well, not personally, but I'm part of a panel where we are conducting market research, where we interview patients. And as I said, I'm a sponsor, so I do not have access directly to the patient myself. And it's astonishing to me how many times the patients, when they are asked the question, did your doctor who you are about to start a clinical trial with go through all the details, the explanation, did he explain what this drug does, what are going to be the side effects? And I would say 70 to 80% of the patients have no idea. Like they say, yeah, no, the doctor said to take it, it's going to be okay for me, and basically very little information about the mechanism, what to expect, or what other patients' experience has been. And to me, that was a crazy idea that the physician wasn't even providing enough information for the patient to make a decision.
So Laura, it's Michael, and I'm kind of curious. What you're suggesting is, a bit more what typically happens with informed consent. I think you're absolutely right that often patients' decision to enroll in something or attempt to enroll in something kind of depends on what it is that are going to be their expectations. And so I think that's good advice. Is there something we should be doing as in the industry, or things that you would suggest?
Well, it seems to me that it has to start with the doctor that these patients clearly trust. Otherwise, they would not engage in a clinical trial. But the physician is the one that is really at the far front with and in contact with the patient. So they should be the one really responsible for providing the correct information, all the information that the patient needs, and not just dismiss whatever because maybe they don't have a PhD in pharmacology or something. So from these calls, it was obvious to me that some, and I'm generalizing, but not all of the doctors are like this, but a lot of them didn't seem to be very willing to share a lot of the information that maybe will take down some of the barriers and make it as less intimidating maybe for patients.
Very good, thank you.
Hey Laura, can I ask you a quick question about that? This is Edie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, did you find that it was the physician just like handing this massive consent form to the patient and saying, take it home and read it, but here the overall is you can do this, it's safe? Or was it not even that?
I don't have that information. But
I was just kind of curious, more nuanced details of that, because that's concerning.
Yeah, so I'm not the one doing doing the questions, so I can't really go deeper.
No worries. I just figured it was worth an ask.
Yeah, no, I don't have that level of details, but that some 70% of the patients report, at least in my small sample size, that the physician didn't share a lot of information with them. And then there is the opposite side. Some physicians, the patient said, I felt very comfortable because my doctor really went into a lot of details and explained to me everything I wanted to know. So, but the majority wasn't like that. And so I think that it's great to have all these patient support groups, the media, the groups, but at the end of the day, I think these patients really trust and rely upon their doctors to get the information.
Great point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Talia,
Elizabeth?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to inquire from the group, one of the things that we've been hearing, and as recent as yesterday on a different research call, the issues relating to the patient really understanding what the trial will entail. And that is everything from frequency to duration to, just the how they'll feel in the process, including the side effects. And I'm just wondering whether anybody's really figured out a good way to preview. I mean, it's really like a preview of the movie that's going to play through the trial, right? Which is different than, and one of the things that we were also discussing is the distinction between the informed consent, which might have all the words on it, right? But like that really transmitting to the patient's cognition and understanding, right? What we say versus what they understand and hear. So I'm just curious whether folks have, something to say about best practices or what you're seeing really work well. And is that an opportunity, to really innovate in that corridor? And, should we really be tying all of our, educational sort of hopes and dreams on the docs that are quite busy and patients who can only absorb so much information in an encounter that's, minutes, not hours. So I'll pause there.
Hey, Elizabeth, have you seen any of the remote and or electronic, depending on how they're being marketed, informed consent platforms that are offering essentially, in addition to allowing for that, they also then do almost like what you just described, like a play-by-play of what the trial and participating in it would be like. And what they're doing is they're not only offering that as a video that the patient would watch before they even begin the remote or electronic informed consent, just so they can watch it with their family, watch it multiple times if they would like to digest it.
Yeah.
And it talks about all phases. But there's talk of then that being something that even if a patient were to be in person in the clinic, that a clinic could offer on an iPad to the person sitting in the waiting room. So they could be watching it before they walked into their encounter with their physician. And using that, since we're already building these platforms and expanding this technology, using it for exactly that purpose. And I don't want to name names on here as a endorsement, but if you want to talk offline, I'm happy to tell you of the few, I don't know many, but the few that I know that are moving into this space.
Yeah, that would be great, actually. And we're really interested because I think it really boils down to having patients, really understand and ultimately then having both sides, both the trialist as well as the patient have a good experience through that journey.
Absolutely. And it gets back to what Laura's talking about. It supplements the doctor encounter. And for me, the compliance angle, it's standardized. I can guarantee that every patient truly got that information and had it at their fingertips and was able to share it in a meaningful, standardized way with their caregivers, their family members, their stakeholders in their world.
Yeah, no, I think that's fantastic. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I would like to add to that too. Completely agree with what you just said, Edie, and I think this is a really thoughtful question, Elizabeth. I mean, the way I think about this is that we're interacting with potential study participants all the time, in advance of them even knowing about a trial, right? We're sort of trying to figure out a brand for our industry, our clinical trials work, the important work that we're doing in clinical trials, and the role that humans play in clinical trials, whether they're a future participant, a current participant, a current patient, a future patient, whatever that may be. So there's that component, and then the engagement and interactions and communications that we have with people that are more specific to their I guess more near-term participation or current participation in an actual trial. It spans everything from the materials that they're seeing that on social media, as we talked about, or in their doctor's office, the discussions that they're having with their doctor and their coordinator, the actual informed consent that they're signing, and other materials like newsletters and things like that go out while the participants are on trial. I think we are getting better about sort of the way that we do things when people are on trial, when participants are on trial with consents and things. And I also have worked with a couple of platforms that do a really good, that are starting to do a really good job of that, creating, sort of keeping the technical language that needs to be in an informed consent, because that's the way we do things in our industry, highly regulated and compliant, but also providing, those visual and interactive materials to support the real cognition and understanding of what the trial is like. I think there's more work we can do about how we continue to communicate with participants when they're on trial. For example, a 5-year or 6-year or 10-year long study, how are we continually, all of us, from the sponsor to the groups that are running the trial, how are we continuing to communicate with them? I'd love to hear if anybody has thoughts about how we're communicating, in that regard.
Hey everyone, it's Heather. I agree with you, Talia, so much on that point that you just said at the end. I don't have an answer since I'm not on that side, but I think it's hugely important. It's sort of along the lines of, here buy my product, and then you're off on your own. And so that process of after someone says, yes, I'm willing to do this thing that could be very scary for me, how are we continuing that conversation versus sort of putting them into and it's not a great word for it, but factory of going through the process of this clinical trial that's very functional for most of the people that are involved in the process. And it's rare unless you have a very active advocacy group that are helping patients in a particular trial really understand things outside of the scope of their engagement every time they go, to a clinic or to the hospital for whatever the shot or the treatment might be. But other than that, there's not a lot of that support after that decision-making point and that enrollment. So I think if there's anybody out there who's working on how do we continue that relationship with those patients after they've made a decision, and I think that would go a long way to help those patients also share more about this process to others and communicate that out and help us with the process of engaging with people who might be potential patients. So I'm Heather and I'm done speaking.
Amazing, Heather. Thanks. Any other, Edie? Any thoughts from you?
I totally agree, right? And so there's this, I'm sitting here thinking as we're talking, being on the regulatory side, having frankly come into the clinical research world at the IRB level, working for, and being on the ops side of that, and then having this ethics and legal background. Well, it's often the conception, right, that the lawyers on the IRB are the ones going just make sure that informed consent's signed, just make sure it's initialed on every page, don't forget to date it or else. And that is all important, and I'm certainly not saying we don't enforce that audit. The way we teach it to our own people, the way we learn it, is completely different.
Oh, yeah.
Completely. It is 100% taught the way we are talking about it on this call, but it should be this ongoing conversation that should never end, that starts from the moment you bring it up to the patient, the moment that they're in your waiting room, right? The moment that they're in your office, the moment you even have so much as an advertisement of some sort, a recruitment flyer that winds up in their hands. That is truly when the conversation begins. And so there's this regulatory part of me that's man, this is exactly what we want. This is what we wanted all along. But, of course, because of the audit mechanisms, because of the checkboxes, because of the way that we go about having to document, right? Get in our CTMS, was consent done? Yes. What date? What time? Who did it? Has it been uploaded? It has branded into a checkbox. Nothing grates on me more when I'm talking to a site and they say, did you get the HIPAA? And I'm like, oh my gosh, no. You don't get the HIPAA. You have a conversation with someone about their rights and what it means and what we're documenting. It's not the HIPAA. And so, and I say that to say, anyone who really digs deep in regulatory would love to see this rebranded. Granted, we're in a very litigious society. There's some elements of that aren't going to go away. But I think that as we see the advent of the telehealth, the informed consent, the use of more diagrams, pictures, explanation, ways of having this conversation throughout the life of the trial, I actually think it will be a very, and this is optimistic to say in this group, but that it will be somewhat organically helpful to then create a stronger impetus on the regulatory side to bring down the checkbox mentality and rebrand this back to what was really intended to be. Because there's recognition on that side of the aisle too, that this is problematic at best, the way it's set up right now, right? Mm-hmm. So I say all that to comment and add to the conversation, not that I have the answers, but I think that this is a really, really important conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Edie. Appreciate that. Allison.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Welcome back.
Thank you. Someone just speak up if I cut out, okay?
Will do.
I just wanted to offer my perspective as a patient who participated in a clinical trial that was like a really serious clinical trial for me. It changed the course of the last 2 years of my life. We had to plan our wedding around it. It was like a really serious commitment for me. And the associate investigator that I talked with, I mean, he did a phenomenal job walking me through informed consent. I felt very educated about what I was committing to. He had phenomenal bedside manner. I mean, it's just exactly what you would ideally want the informed consent process to be. And yet, I want you all to understand that as a patient, I was so scared that I almost backed out of the trial a week before our flight left. Because as a patient who had been, written off by doctors before, told you're just depressed, you just need to go ride a bike, I was so fearful of just the entire medical system and how all of this was going to work. Even though I had a great line of communication with a very compassionate doctor who was, integral in this study. And what convinced me and got me through the study, both visits, was connecting with a patient who had already been through the study before. And I got lucky that I found her in a Facebook group by searching the name of the study. But had I not had that patient connection, I very likely would have never participated in a clinical trial. And so I think that's such a valuable thing. And I don't know, as far as the rules, there's going to be so many barriers to facilitating that. But I just wanted you all to hear my perspective.
That is amazing. And that is such an important perspective, Allison. Thank you for sharing that. I think that makes a lot of sense, of course. I mean, when we're thinking about just how we make decisions in general, like who is going to come in and fix my water heater, I'm not necessarily it's not to me about how much a company is telling me that they know how to fix water heaters and they do it in an engaging way. I want to know other people who've done it. Here, get my and obviously that's a water heater. Here we're talking about participating in a trial that could change your life, and both the benefits and the risks associated with that, which are far more important. So how do we get around this problem? I mean, we're protecting patient. Certainly, patient confidentiality is one of the most important things, aside from their safety and that we're here, mandated in our industry to protect. So, how do we provide these opportunities? I'd love to hear if anybody, what out there, what consortiums, what groups are out there that are able to sort of allow patients to find each other. To talk about these sorts of things. Any input from anyone?
And Tanya, I'll just add to that to also say that, different than, let's say, a water heater, which is kind of an acute issue, with clinical trials that go on for a number of years, there's not only this enrollment language and enrollment trust level that has to be built, but it's also one of looking at the longer-term compliance and adherence that is going to be required from a patient. And, they've got to have that level of trust to continue and other interaction points to keep them engaged. And, I don't know if, Allison, you've got other thoughts on that, but, I think that that's a very real patient interface issue for the industry.
I do have thoughts on this. I mean, I'm going to encourage support group online, like, till the day I die. I mean, they have fundamentally changed my life. They're very powerful things. That being said, there are many challenges to them, and obviously when you're talking about clinical trials, there's even more hurdles in place as far as confidentiality. But I will tell you that, like, so the clinical trial that I participated in, there's only been 14 patients in my cohort, and I have already found 5 of them, and we talk extremely regularly. The relationships that I made of the other patients who have been through this, I mean, I was texting them probably every other hour every day that I was inpatient at the hospital. Those relationships were so important to me because this experience that I went through as a patient participating in this clinical trial was such a unique experience that no one who had not participated in something like that could relate with me. I couldn't talk to people who understood it. And so I think that would help with compliance. For example, before I left for my second visit, I had to record my activity for like every 30 minutes of the day for like 2 weeks prior to leaving. And it was very labor intensive. It was really challenging for me. And I truthfully don't think I would have been compliant with that had I not been talking to the friend that I had made who went through it herself, who gave me tips on how she survived that, on how she approached it. You know, when I had challenges of like, how do I categorize this last 30 minutes because I did this and this? And she said, well, I approached it this way with the documentation. I just think that my compliance as a patient was much higher once I was able to.
Yeah, Allison, I'm not sure if you can hear us. You broke up at the last part there, but I just want to reinforce what you're saying, that you built a certain level of trust with those individuals who were administering the trial, but having the additional validation of what it was that you were doing with whether a formal patient support group or just a small group of other individuals going through the same thing is so critical here. So in reality, having, if you will, an agent or somebody to help you to be able to bounce some of these things and your concerns of, really does make a difference.
Well, and the question I have, this is Dee Dee, for Allison, as we dive into this issue, because it's really interesting, those of us in ops definitely think of this as that research team responsibility, right? Like what she was saying, like they built the trust with me, but they also weren't the patients experiencing what I was experiencing, is a really fantastic point. And so I wonder, as I'm over here just running through in my head, what are genuinely the privacy burdens here? Like, what would really stop us from doing this? What's there? Because people love to, and again, understandably so, go, oh gosh, red tape will never let us do that. You know, IRB will never let us do that. The lawyers will never let us do this. But the reality is, there's a few of us out there who like to get pretty creative and break down those barriers, like myself. And so I'm sitting here thinking, and as I'm coming up with what would be viable, my question to Allison, and I'm hoping she can still hear us, and to the group would be, does it impact, as a patient, the way in which you are officially connected with another patient? We understand in here that you're saying, look, I really need not only the support of the research team, but really I need another person who's in the fire with me, right? A support from that level. So would it matter if it was a patient-driven or patient-led support group, right, that you find on Facebook and you find one another, so it's 100% patient-driven? Or would it matter if, as a part of the research team ops, if we could get it approved, let's just take that off the table for a second, then would it matter if it was actually the research team saying we would like to connect patients with one another? So it would still be patient-to-patient support, but it would be facilitated by the research team as opposed to just the patients facilitating it themselves. Would that matter for impact?
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
I would love if the research team could facilitate it. I had to do so much legwork myself to seek these people out. I found one on Facebook, I found one on Twitter, I found another one because they were in a news article about our study. Like, I had to do so much labor to find them.
Okay, so that's super good to know, because I can make the argument in my head, right, that like it might need to be a patient seeking another patient out. It might feel pedantic or something, or patriarchal to have the research team pair you up. But this is really interesting, Allison, because this is in my mind, in my limited, can't speak for regulatory agency's opinion. This is doable. This is doable. This is achievable.
I love it. It's really interesting as a concept.
Absolutely, I love it as well. I mean, of course, like you said, Edie, my first thought was, well, how could we possibly set patients participating in the same trial up with one another that violates their privacy, so on and so on. Of course, there are creative ways that we create, that we can think about how we create that forum in a way that allows people to opt in, of course. They have to want to participate in that. They have to, but it gives them that, it takes sort of that legwork off of the patient. I can imagine, Allison, like you said, having to do so much work to go seek out people. You're literally stealth, you're looking for people who may be participating, and I'm sure that was just a ton of work. But if we could in a compliant way create that forum that then allows people to to participate if and when they want to, and then they can be that sounding board and so on. I think that's just wonderful. It's such a unique idea. It's so simple. Like, why didn't we think of this? Of course. But yeah, very, very great.
I would like to say something. I think that the rare disease community actually is pretty good at having these patient-supported organizations. They have their own. It seems to me that each of these rare diseases have their own group, right? It's maybe not as obvious for the larger indications. What do people think about this? Is that your experience too?
I see it in oncology as well as rare disease, Laura.
Okay.
I have a question about that, just to follow on here. In rare disease and oncology, are the groups, the sort of support communities that created, do they get specific to sort of the study level, as opposed to the more general condition?
So in my experience, it depends. More often than not, it's going to be disease area, right, and grouping, not trial level. But I have seen it happen on trial level, or at least it's grouped amongst a few trials that have very similar regimens, very similar side effects, very similar commitments, right? So the patients are pretty close to one another. But then it'll get as broad. Now, rare disease is almost always, where I've seen it at the research site level, is truly actually by trial. Because there's such a small number of individuals, nationally or internationally, they can truly connect them.
Yeah, and I see in the area I'm working in that the physicians, the good ones, as they discuss the IRB, but they also provide the brochure they discuss the ICF and the study design, but they also provide information for the patient group, support group. So I think there is a mechanism for that. Well, it has to come from who really interfaces with the patients and in the trial.
Right. And the reality too is, at least for those who are US bound from the HIPAA perspective, it is in the hands of the patient. That is their right to waive as well as to protect. And so if a patient willfully and voluntarily wants to connect with another patient, is willing to share their information, they are, we get so in the business of protecting patients and protecting their data, we forget that there is the right to waive it. It's just like if you decided, if I go to my doctor's appointment today and I say I'd like to bring my partner, I'd like to bring my parent, I am waiving my HIPAA privilege in that moment because it's my privilege to waive that you may now, provider, speak freely in front of this person about my condition and my treatment plan. And so it really, from the regulatory perspective, it would go back to that same principle. And so since we've seen it work well, and obviously there's still a very high demand from what we're hearing from Allison, I think it's a matter of how do we honestly, put it into more trials that we will attempt at least, or create a safe and supportive space for a support group to in fact occur at the volition of the patients.
Yeah, Edie, this is Michael, and I agree. I think it's a stepwise approach because, we certainly know that successfully communicating with potential study participants isn't something that can just start from zero and then go to full trust in one conversation. And I think that's a lot of the thinking behind Consuli, where a patient-centric relationship is built over time before the opportunity to enroll in the trial is ever presented. So this Consuli member then can have a level of trust built. I'll ask Elizabeth if she can add a bit of perspective to this from what we've learned.
Sure, Michael. And let me just say it's been a great session for insights. I just want to thank Allison, Edie, and Laura, and Heather for the teasing out what in my mind are, real big potentials here. One on this engaging consent and informed consent preview process, which Edie, I'd love to talk to you more about what you're seeing out there, since I think that is an important part of the patient having opportunities really presented to them in a way that they can understand, and they really understand what they're signing up to. So all of that. And then also this patient peer, both at the inception recruitment as well as the support during, what is others have described as, a long journey. So love that those are emerging. Just broadly, just to share a little bit about Consuli, which Michael's already previewed. We're a public benefit company. Our aim is to fairly deal individuals into the data economy. That's like the 100,000 foot view. And, in that context, strangely and interestingly, individual data is worth about $20,000 a year in an annuity. So we think that's a big game changer for many people in society. And, we do this by operating this marketplace for members. We become their agent, which allows us to assemble the patient's electronic health records, labs, wearables, etc. And we then provide smart offers, so instead of searching, one is able to get the offers for opportunities, including for clinical trials or data trials, sent directly to them, really aligned with the IE or the inclusion-exclusion criteria of the particular trial. And that for clinical trial, on the other side of the coin for the sponsors, it means a ready-to-enroll reservoir of trial participants that's really not been historically visible. So I'll stop there. I just want to say thanks so much to the panel and for the insights.
Appreciate that. Tanya, I think given the time, we probably want to be thinking a little bit about how we can construct next week's One Burning Question.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So one of the cool things about our clubhouse here is that we like to, create one burning question every week, and we want to take a quick poll of the room here and just see what stood out to you. What did we not talk about that you'd love to talk about? We'd love to just hear from the team right here. So, Edie, any input from you?
I was just thinking, and this would be a carryover in some sense of what we talked about today, but I would be super curious as we talk about patient and peer-led support groups, how do we go a step further and create an environment where a potential participant, someone who's considering and been presented with a trial, would then be empowered to talk to someone who's on trial and have that bird's eye view. Because it's like the analogy you used, Talia, right? Like you want to hear from someone who used the services or the product and what the end result was, right? And is that something that we can empower, and is that something that would assist in patient recruitment? And I'll park it there.
Hi, it's Heather here. I love that. I mean, when you want to fix your dishwasher, you might go to a Home Star first. You're going to pop in and see what people have to say about something, and how do we make something secure and safe and connected versus all the different iterations that I'm sure are out there. It sounds like to me are being self-led by patients when industry, I think we have hesitancy where we don't want to feel like we're stepping on toes or pushing forward an opinion where, we know this is a great idea, you should too. And provide a space without influencing the space, which I think would be an interesting place to explore. Not sure if it's right for next week, but I think it's fantastic, and I hope we touch base on this again. I'm Heather, and I'm done speaking.
Thank you, Heather. I want to ask if anyone else has any other ideas. Anybody that maybe not on the stage but has any input, please feel free to raise your hand here. Also, another way to reach us is, of course, give the moderators and the folks on the stage a follow, and we can certainly reach out afterward if you have any ideas around our one burning question. We're going to be creating, we've got a good list going on of different questions, different themes that are coming up in these Clubhouse talks that we're having. But always want to make sure that we're creating a great environment that allows us to build from week to week. So if anything stood out today, or if we didn't get to something, but you felt like we were sort of in the thread of something, we didn't get to it, feel free to shout it out right now.
And that certainly includes anybody who's listening in the audience. Please just raise your hand. We'd love to hear from you. We see a lot of really experienced individuals out there, so don't hesitate.
Okay. Just give that a second. So what we're hearing is this discussion around, what can we do to create an environment? Maybe can we discuss that some more? Also heard some other stuff today that was pretty interesting around patient, in the same vein of patient trust, and sort of digging into some of those things some more. Awesome. Thanks.
In the meantime, if people are sort of thinking about some ideas that they want to throw out there, I just kind of want to chime in and mention to remember to follow each other. If there's anyone that spoke today that inspired you or that you would like to hear from again, just give them a follow. Let's all follow each other. Be sure to follow me, or take a look at my profile for all the rooms that Consuli hosts, as well as a way to contact me directly with any questions. Our social medias are connected on there as well. So I just want to put that out there and make sure everybody has a chance to follow each other. And if there's any questions at all, I'm happy to help with that. So, Talia?
Yeah, great. I think we've got a good idea here for next week's one burning question. So I think we're good there, Michael.
Yeah, it sounds great. First of all, Talia, outstanding moderation here, and to Heather the same. And Edie, thanks so much for really chiming in and giving us some really good stuff to chew on. And of course, from the patient perspective, Allison, your inputs are, were very, very well pointed, and certainly welcome more of that. I think this has been a really wonderful collection of contributors, and we are finding the Clubhouse experience to be really energizing. We're growing this each week, and we hope you find this as engaging as well. So please feel free via Clubhouse, direct message, or drop us a LinkedIn message. Any comments or suggested topics, and most importantly, we really hope that you'll come back next week for another what we call OBQ, or one burning question, and we'll try to bring you something that will be really engaging and potentially controversial to discuss. So with that, any other comments? Okay.
No.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you so
It's
much.
great.
Julie, I'll let you close us out then.
All right. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Edie.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Edie. Bye.